Right now, somewhere on your dashboard, a setting is quietly fighting your engine, and it has nothing to do with slippery roads. It's reading your confident, everyday acceleration as a wheel about to lose control. And when it decides that, it pulls back power and taps the brakes to correct something that was never actually wrong. That's one setting out of 7 on this list. One of them is actively interfering with how your Ford drives right now. Another is quietly wasting fuel every time you use it without thinking. And the last one is so stupidly simple, you're going to wonder why it was ever left on in the first place. After 15 years working on Fords, I've seen the same thing over and over again. Owners come into the shop convinced something's wrong with their engine, and sometimes the truck is perfectly fine, it's a setting. These systems aren't broken. They're designed around efficiency, emissions, safety, and drivability, but what makes sense on paper doesn't always translate perfectly to the way you actually drive. And depending on how you drive, small efficiency losses can add up to real money over a year. Setting number 5 is the one that starts arguments every time I bring it up, because most owners swear it can't possibly be costing them anything. Then I show them the numbers. And the final one isn't some complicated engine setting at all, it's something you could change in seconds. And there's a good chance you've never even looked at it. I'm saving the biggest one for last. Number 7. Traction control uses wheel speed sensors to catch a tire that's actually spinning faster than the others. A real loss of grip, not a guess. That mostly shows up during hard acceleration from a stop, on uneven pavement, gravel dust, or painted lane lines, especially on trucks with enough low-end torque to break a rear tire loose without you meaning to. When it decides that's happening, it briefly cuts throttle and taps the brake on that wheel to correct it, and you compensate by pressing the pedal a little harder to get the response you expected. Of everything on this list, this is probably the smallest effect of the 7 most drivers won't trigger it often enough for it to matter much. But if you're doing a lot of stop-and-go acceleration on rough or dusty surfaces, those small corrections can add up. On models that offer it, selecting Sport or pressing the traction control button once can reduce that intervention without turning the system off completely. Check your owner's manual, since the exact controls vary by model and year. And to be clear, if you're driving normally, you don't need to touch this at all. The point isn't to defeat a safety system, it's to avoid triggering it unnecessarily. But here's where it gets interesting. Because the next setting on this list isn't hiding behind a warning light at all, it's something sitting right on your climate control panel that most owners touch every single day without knowing what it's actually costing them. Number 6. You probably touch this setting every time you get in your Ford. Your compressor is driven straight off the engine's accessory belt, and it can put a noticeable load on the engine, especially when cooling demand is high power. Your engine has to burn extra fuel to produce, and never gets to use moving the truck. Running max AC keeps the system demanding as much cooling as possible, so the compressor can work harder and more often when conditions call for it. Once the cabin is comfortable, Auto can manage the system without demanding maximum cooling continuously, and it still gets you there. This isn't going to magically add 5 miles per gallon. But if you're running max AC for hours when you don't need to, you're asking the engine to do more work than it has to. The fix costs you nothing. Leave it in Auto instead of max, and let the system do the cycling for you. But 6 isn't the one most Ford owners fight me on. That comes next, and when I show them the numbers, this is where the argument usually ends. Number 5. This is the one that starts arguments every time I bring it up, because most owners point to their dashboard and tell me their tires are fine, no light, no problem. Here's what that light actually means. By regulation, it's only required to turn on once a tire is roughly 25% below the recommended pressure. On a truck like an F-150 running the recommended 35 psi, that math puts the warning threshold at around 26 psi, meaning a tire can already be significantly underinflated, and the dashboard still shows nothing wrong. You don't have to be anywhere near that low to feel the effect. Even a tire a few psi under spec increases rolling resistance, and that resistance is extra work your engine has to do on every single rotation of that wheel. A tire can be costing you fuel long before the TPM's light comes on. A cheap tire gauge will catch it, the dashboard won't. Check your pressure against the number on your driver's door jamb once a month, not the number printed on the tire's sidewall. And you've fixed the cheapest, easiest item on this entire list. And once owners actually see their real pressure numbers next to what the light was letting them ignore, that's usually where the argument ends. Number 4. Auto start-stop is genuinely designed to save fuel, and in the right conditions, it does cutting the engine at a light instead of idling as real, measurable savings. But the right conditions is doing more work than most owners realize. In heavy stop and go traffic, with the engine restarting again and again during short stops, the repeated restart cycles can reduce how much time you actually spend saving fuel. The savings are real. They're just not a magic MPG button, and the benefit depends heavily on how you drive. If you find the constant cycling annoying, you can disable it when your model allows, right near the shifter. Just don't expect a dramatic mileage jump from doing it. This one's more about honesty than headline numbers. And now we're getting into the settings most Ford owners never think to question. Number 3 is costing some owners fuel before the truck ever leaves the driveway. Remote start. On many Fords, the remote start timer can run for up to 15 minutes before you get in, and you don't need anywhere close to that just to get the engine ready to drive. Once you're actually driving gently, the engine can continue warming under light load instead of spending the entire cycle sitting still. If your Ford lets you adjust the remote start duration in Ford Pass, cut it to the shortest practical time for your conditions. How short depends on how cold it actually is where you live, not a fixed number that works for everyone. Do this every winter morning, and you can burn a meaningful amount of fuel every day, just sitting there, accomplishing nothing but warming a seat nobody's in yet. But the next setting isn't something you turn off. It's something most owners are getting completely wrong without realizing it. Number 2. This is the one most owners don't even remember choosing. Sport mode sharpens your throttle and holds each gear longer, keeping the engine at higher RPM and holding gears longer than normal or eco mode typically would great for a stretch of highway on ramp or a spirited back road. The problem is what happens after that. A lot of drivers flip into sport for one merge, one hill, one moment of fun, and then just leave it there for the rest of the week. The fix costs nothing. It's the same button you use to turn sport on. So switch it back once whatever you needed it for is done. The fuel cost isn't constant. Either cruising steady in sport doesn't hit you nearly as hard as stop and go, or aggressive driving does, where the higher shift points and sharper throttle response add up fast. Some Explorer ST owners have reported noticeable mileage differences on their own daily routes, comparing sport against eco, not a controlled lab number. Just a real-world pattern worth knowing about. And now the one that changes everything. Number 1. This is the one that changes everything, because it's a setting that could be sitting in the wrong position on your truck right now, and you'd have no way of knowing unless you check. Tow haul mode is designed to do exactly what its name says when there's weight behind you. It holds gears longer and shifts later, keeping the engine in its power band so the transmission isn't hunting for the right gear under load. That's genuinely useful when you're towing. The problem is what happens afterward. You tow something once, flip the button on, and the truck stays in that mode long after the trailer's back in storage, because unlike a lot of settings on this list, nothing about daily driving forces you to notice it's still on. The transmission can hold lower gears and keep the engine at higher RPM than normal driving calls for. Exactly the same trade-off you saw with sport mode, just coming from the transmission side instead of the throttle. The fix is the easiest one on this entire list. It's the same button you press to turn it on. Check it before your next drive. There's a real chance you've been running it for weeks or months without ever noticing. Go through this list this weekend. Not all 7 will apply to your exact truck, but there's a good chance at least a few will. Check the settings that apply to your truck, make one change at a time, and track your mileage before and after. because the numbers won't lie to you the way a showroom floor will. Most of this isn't hidden, it's just buried in an owner's manual that most people never read. If this saved you money before you've even started your truck this week, subscribe and drop a comment telling me which one of these 7 you had absolutely no idea was working against you. If you know a Ford owner complaining about their mileage, send them this video. They might be paying for a problem they can fix for free. And if you want to see what happens when 3 American icons get pushed to their absolute limit, watch this next. We tested Mustang GT, Camaro SS and Challenger RT. After 200,000 miles, only one survived.